Are you familiar with Mandela effects? Because that's what we're talking about today. Stick around and let's get into it. Hi, and welcome to the Wholeness Shift. My name is Veronica, and I help people navigate their spiritual awakenings. I talk about easy, practical spirituality. We talk about everything on this channel. We talk about spirit guides and pendulums and dreams and ghosts and aliens and all the things. So if this interests you, why don't you hit the subscribe button below, because it really helps me so much and I don't want you to miss out on anything good. Mandela effects. Are you familiar with this concept? Do you have any examples in your own personal life? Leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear about them. They're outside fixing my fence, so if you... And I have the hiccups. What a mess. If you hear them drilling and pounding and stuff outside, they're fixing my fence. I ate too much, and as soon as I take one bite too many, I get the hiccups. So, I have the hiccups. A Mandela effect, in its simplest terms, is evidence of a timeline shift. It's when you remember things being a certain way, but a lot of people around you don't. They have a different memory of that thing. And that means that at some point in time, you were likely on a different timeline where the memory you have existed. Now you're on this timeline where these people exist and their memory exists. You may remember a certain event happening, a certain brand being spelled a different way than it is now. You may remember a certain historical event happening, but these people say it never happened. There are so many examples of this, and I'll get into those a little bit later. This is called a Mandela effect because when Nelson Mandela, the first democratically elected president of South Africa, who spent 27 years in prison, he was known for his fight for peace and for unity. He was anti-apartheid, and, they locked him up. Beautiful man. He was eventually released. However, when this man died, I think it was like in 2013, I and a lot of other people around the world were like, huh? Because I remember him dying, like in the 80s. I specifically remember him dying in the 80s, and a lot of other people do too. And the rest of the world is like, no, he didn't. He was alive and well. Well, I don't know about well, because he was in prison, but I mean, he was alive, and he just died like now. And I'm like, that's really weird, because I know that he died like then. So, anyways, that term came into existence because of that. When one group remembers things a certain way, another group remembers them another way. It's called the Mandela effect. So let's get into some examples of this. There are a lot of them, and I only picked a handful of them here. And then I'll throw in a couple of them that happened in my own life, one of them just the other day, because I think we just went through a big timeline shift in the last week or so, and you let me know if you've felt it and if you feel the same way. Okay, let's get going. Number 1, Jiffy peanut butter. I remember it being Jiffy when I was young, and according to the powers that be, it has never been Jiffy. It has only ever been Jif, J-I-F. Number 2, Looney Tunes. So I remember this being spelled T-O-O-N-S, like you are Looney Tunes. The tunes doesn't mean like a song, T-U-N-E-S. However, that's what it is now. It's spelled Looney, T-U-N-E-S, Looney Tunes, like Looney songs. And according to Warner Brothers, or whoever makes this, it's always been that way. And I'm like, tell me what you remember. The Berenstein Bears. Now, I also remember this being the Berenstein, S-T-E-I-N, bears. But allegedly, it has never been that, and it was always the Berenstain Bears, Stain, and I'm like, no. Berenstain Bears were really popular when I was a kid back in the 70s and 80s, and I remember it was Berenstain. What do you remember? Number 4, Sex in the City. A lot of people swear that this was always called Sex in, I-N, the City, but allegedly it has always been Sex and the City. I remember the and. I remember it like it is now, so maybe those people were on a different timeline than me. Number 5, the Monopoly Man. You know, the little guy, the little Monopoly guy. Some people remember him as having a monocle, you know, the little one-piece eyeglass that goes over one eye. And the people who make the Monopoly game are like, that has never been a thing. He has never had glasses or a monocle. And I'm like, yes, he did. And they're like, no, he didn't. So what do you remember? Do you remember anything different? Pikachu, number 6. A lot of people, including myself, remember Pikachu having a black, the tip of Pikachu's tail being black. But supposedly, Pikachu's tail has only ever been yellow. Number 7, Star Wars. How many of you remember C-3PO as just being all gold? Well, now the timeline says that C-3PO has always had one silver leg, that he's not all gold. He has a silver leg. And, you know, Star Wars was super popular back in the 80s when I was growing up, and my little brother and the lady that babysat us, she had a little boy, and like they had all the Star Wars toys. And I know that C-3PO was a little gold figurine, and I remember C-3PO being gold. But supposedly he's always had one silver leg. Number 8, the Flintstones. Now, I remember this being the Flint, F-L-I-N-T, stones. I mean, it made sense because, I mean, they were cavemen. Flint is a kind of stone. They were talking about flint stones. But supposedly it has always been Flintstones. No first T in there, just F-L-I-N, stones. Flintstones. I disagree. What do you remember? Number 9, this was a big one. Fruit of the Loom. Myself and many other people remember Fruit of the Loom, the logo for Fruit of the Loom always having a cornucopia in it. It's a cornucopia with a bunch of fruit spilling out of it. But according to Fruit of the Loom, that has never been the case. There has never been a cornucopia. Now, one lady actually did her due diligence and like scoured thrift shops and things like that, and she managed to find a couple of examples that still existed where the cornucopia was there. So in these kind of situations, like, what would the company benefit from gaslighting its consumers? Why don't they just admit, yeah, it used to be there, but we changed it? Like, there's proof. We found the proof that we're right. So with these, you know, with things like Mandela and time, historical events, things like that, you can't just change that. Like, a company can't just change that. But with things like Jif or Jiffy or the Flintstones or Fruit of the Loom, they could change that. But why? Now, I'm not saying that I buy into this belief or not. I'm not putting an opinion out there. I'm just saying that there have been speculations that perhaps this is like a deep state type of, what's the word I'm looking for? Experiment to do on humanity to see how easy they are to manipulate and gaslight, so that they can kind of rewrite history or rewrite events. Because you're like, I remember it this way, and they're like, no, you don't. And you're like, I do, actually. And they're like, never happened. Are you sure? Like, you're all there? Can you trust yourself? Can you trust your memories? I don't know, because it was never that way. And you're like, I know, I remember that, don't I? And they're like, no, you don't, because it was never like that. And then they have other people convinced, and the other people are like, no, it was never that way. And you're like, wow, I must be losing it. I really thought. And they're like, no. So a lot of people have this conspiracy theory saying that perhaps it's the government doing an experiment. And I don't mean like the government, like your everyday government, your state government, the president, that kind of thing. I'm talking about like the government, the deep government, the deep behind the scenes government. So I have a few examples in my own life that have happened, and one of them just happened this week. So number one for me, I have a couple other ones too, but I can't remember them off the top of my head. Anyways, the ones that I remember right now, number one is the Lobster Brothers. There is a small local place in Westlake, Ohio that sells seafood. Like they either sell it to cater for parties, or you can buy little things and carry it out. Like you could get a lobster roll or crab cakes, or, things like that. Well, when I used to live on that side of town, my daughter Amelia used to have a doctor's appointment like once a month right across the street from it. And you would come out of the parking lot, drive across the street directly into the other parking lot, and the Lobster Brothers was there. It was in an L-shaped shopping center, and it was in the corner of that L, and it was right across the street. And every time she had her appointment, I would go over there afterwards and I would get lunch to take home. One day, we were driving out of this parking lot, and I got ready to pull across the street, and I noticed, like, there's nothing there. I think there was a house. And I just sat there, like, dumbfounded for a minute, like, did I pull out of the wrong parking lot? And I looked at Emma, and I'm like, where's Lobster Brothers? And she's like, what the heck? And I'm like, like, it's not like it got torn down. Like, there's like an old house standing there or something. Like, there's nothing there. And I'm like, what is happening? What is happening? And so I just turned out of there, got onto the road, and started driving home. And about a quarter mile down the road, on the left, I see a sign for the Lobster Brothers. And I'm like, what? And so I pull in, and now it's just in this little strip mall and sitting there, and you could tell it's been there a long time. And so I went in, and I'm like, you guys didn't move locations or anything. She's like, nope, we've been here over 20 years. And I'm like, that's what you think. Not in my experience. So yeah, that was weird. Then the other day, I can't remember what day it was. It was earlier this week. And I noticed that things just felt different. Things felt different. I think they felt a little lighter in some aspects. It's hard to articulate how they felt. They just felt better. Things felt better. And on the other hand, a couple of things didn't feel better. I started noticing the thing that got my attention right away was there are 3 areas on my body that I usually have really, really bad pain, chronically. And I've done a lot of work over the last several years to try to heal that and to get rid of that pain, and I had done pretty good. I was feeling pretty good in those areas most of the time. One is right here. I have an old collarbone fracture that never healed right. And so my collarbone kind of, instead of sitting where it's supposed to sit, it's kind of tweaked up here. Like this collarbone goes from here to here and it ends here. And this one's like way up here. See how they're like mismatched? And so it doesn't sit right. It's tilted and it's pushed up. And there's a big gap right here. You can stick your whole finger in it, where it was broken and it never healed right. And I have really bad arthritis in that spot now, and my collarbone hurts all the time. But I've gotten several injections in here, which was not fun, and things to like take down the pain and the inflammation in there. And it had gotten to a point where it was pretty good. The only time it really bothered me is if like I laid on my right side while I was sleeping and had my arm in a funny position, and then I'd have to wake up and be like, oh, ow. But other than that, it didn't bother me. The second place is at the bottom of my right lower back in my SI joint, my sacroiliac joint. It's one of the joints that's like responsible for twerking. I must have worn it out over the years. JK. Anyways, I have really bad arthritis in that SI joint, and I've gotten several injections. I've actually had to go in and be put under anesthesia, and they did work in it. Like, I've had some serious work done on that joint, and it really doesn't bother me much anymore. The third spot is my right foot. I have really bad plantar fasciitis, and it does bother me sometimes. It's not totally gone. I've been to physical therapy recently. I've been doing a lot of exercises. I've done a lot of work on it, and I have like inserts in my shoes to support my arches, and I've just worked really hard to get it to a place where it doesn't bother me that much. It's kind of controlled. Well, earlier this week, I noticed that all three of those spots were just screaming as if I had never done any work on any of them, screaming as if I'm back in time like 5 or 6 years, just like I'm like none of the work I had done had ever been done. Like, I'm in pain big time in all three of those spots. And I was like, what happened? That's really weird. What is happening? Why are all of these suddenly hurting out of the blue? And my first thought was like, it's like I jumped onto an old timeline where I didn't get any of this work done. Then, so those were the first two things. I noticed it felt different. I noticed my pain came back. And then I noticed that my daughter Maddie and I were sitting on the back patio visiting together the other night. And we kind of noticed it at the same time. Or I looked over and I was like, to my neighbor's yard, and I was like, there's a willow tree over there. And she's like, I know. I noticed that when I was in your pool. I just forgot to say something. And I'm like, they cut that down. She goes, I know. I was so mad when they cut that down. I'm like, me too. That tree was so beautiful. I think willow trees are so pretty. And I remember I used to lay in the pool and just look at it, and the leaves would be swaying. And she's like, that's how I could always spot your house from the highway. Like, I live by a highway. She's like, I would just look for the big willow tree and know that you're right next to it. And it was just gone one day, last summer, a year ago. And I'm like, right. So how is it back? And she's like, this is crazy. So I went back through my old vlogs for the last few years and got screenshots from the backyard. 2 years ago, the tree was there. 1 year ago, last summer, it was gone because they hired a tree company. They came in, they cut it down to the ground, they ground the stump, they got rid of that tree. And in the picture, you can see the tree is gone. This summer, all of a sudden, that tree is back. There is a willow tree in their backyard. And I'm like, so I think we jump timelines. I do. What are your thoughts about this? What do you think? Let me know your thoughts. I'd love to know if you've had any experiences, particularly this week, but also in general. If you want more information on timelines, or you aren't even sure what timeline jumping or shifting is or what that means, I will link below to a video that I made on timelines. And I hope you guys have an amazing week. Leave your comments, and if you haven't yet, please hit the like and the subscribe buttons, because it really means a lot to me and I appreciate it. Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.